We effectively have a compensation cap on the earnings that a physical therapist can do. Let's hypothetically say a PT works at an outpatient clinic and 100% of their patients is either Medicare or Medicare Advantage or a payer, in some states the Blues, that follow Medicare rules. They effectively, the max revenue they can generate by seeing 8 or 9 patients a day, 46 weeks a year, 47 weeks a year, is around $210,000. And so that's before you paid for the lights, you paid for revenue cycle management, you paid for any support staff that you need that contributes to you seeing those patients. It's our own profession. It's just really restricted us in terms of the, RCs and exclusive PT can only be one-on-one, all that kind of BS. They have superimposed rules that do not allow us to use extenders like PT technicians or PT assistants. At the top of our license, we have a higher burnout rate than a higher attrition rate, probably than any other profession.
Today on the show, we welcome Larry Benz, a seasoned physical therapist and a thought leader who's here to challenge some uncomfortable truths about our profession. I love that. In his recent 2-part blog series, Larry dives deep into the productivity crisis facing PTs, comparing our work to orthopedic surgeons and family physicians. And the findings were eye-opening. With only 19% of PTs actively treating patients and productivity declining, Larry calls for a good hard look at how we value and compensate clinical care. Are we pushing our best clinicians out of patient care? What does the data say? And why is our productivity slipping despite advances in technology? Whether you're a PT, practice owner, or someone passionate about the future of healthcare, this conversation will make you rethink the direction of our profession. Stay with us because Larry's insights might just change the way you see all things physical therapy. This is PT Pintcast. Welcome back to the show, man. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, anytime.
You're doing something different. You're writing a lot. You're writing often. You've got a Substack platform. For people who don't know that, that's a really simple or streamlined or easily digestible way for someone to take words and thoughts and then get them to a lot of people who might want to sort of tap into that. Where back in the day, it would be like a listserv or an email list. And I think now we're getting more sophisticated. Ironically, we're getting more sophisticated by making it simpler. And you're using Substack, and people can find you on Substack. What is the way that all things physical therapy, all things happen?
All things physical therapy. I think I'm also known as physical therapist on there, physical therapy there.
Now, before we get into this kind of 2-part series that like caught my eye because you show up in my inbox, why'd you decide to start writing so much? Like, what do you get out of that? Like, why? Because there's effort involved in that.
No, absolutely. I think a couple things. One is I've been writing for a long time. If you look at my body of work, we were the first multi-author blog on the internet, and it was under Evidence in Motion, which still houses all my blog posts, hundreds and hundreds of them, literally. And at the time, we were creating vibe in the industry by challenging some of the, assumptions. So many years that I was a CEO, I did just as much writing, but I was writing different for my own employees. And not so much on the politics and the rules and regulations of PT, but more on employee motivation and culture and values. And now I've transitioned back. I've had this sort of pent up stuff on my brain for a long time about PT. And so I'm writing to my colleagues. And if they find it useful and valuable, great. If they don't, or if it sparks some creativity, great. I charge nothing for it. There's no profit motive at all. I really just try to get some conversation going, and I try to expose things that a lot of people aren't talking about.
The reason this one, I wanted to have you on for this is I saw it in my inbox. I saw it online, and I saw people starting to engage. And I like that. I like when people agree or disagree, but have an opinion, like challenge. And you sort of put it out there a few times, which is like, challenge this. Like, is everything I say perfect? Absolutely not. But you got the conversation going. And I say this line a lot when people come to me and they're like, how do I create content? I'm like, don't try to create social media content. Try to create something media that is social. If you said at a water cooler, would someone agree? Would their eyebrow go up? So this is a 2-part series, and we'll give a link in the show notes so people can go read and sort of go deep into this. Mm-hmm. But in the series, you revealed that PTs only see around 400 patient visits per year. while our colleagues that are orthopedic surgeons are doing about 800 visits annually, and family physicians manage nearly 2,000. And you write, physical therapists on a per visit basis are only roughly about 50% as productive as an orthopedist and 20% as a family physician. So why do you think PTs are so much less, I'll use air quotes, productive by comparison? And what are the biggest factors that contribute to this gap?
Yeah. So in order to, I'll get to the answer to that. But what sparks all this is workforce development. If you look at some of the more academic writing that I've done, it has really been publishing articles that challenge workforce development that the APTA and the workforce development study did, now many years ago, where they effectively said by this time we would have an abundance and have an oversupply of physical therapists. When the market has something to say about that, and the expansion of the PT practice has something to say about it, and the fact that at best we see 12 to 15% of the
Right.
population that needs us has something to say about that, and the practice expands. And things have moved out from a hospital and institutional environment to outpatient, and to a wellness perspective that a lot of PTs work in. And so I've always had, a keen sense of workforce development, how many PTs there are, how many programs there are. As you know, I'm very active in higher education of physical therapists. And so I've always wanted to know, what is our supply? What is our demand? There is a forthcoming work group that APTA put together that will have a paper that is right now under sort of confidentiality, but it will come out, and I don't think the results of it will be surprising to anybody, without letting the cat out of the bag there. But at the end of the day, let's look at our own profession, and now let's analyze ourselves a little bit. So we have about 250,000 PTs
Right.
in the U.S. We have roughly, and this is multiple data sources that suggest we have about 100 million visits per year.
Okay.
Now, those visits can take the form of an outpatient location. They can take the form of an inpatient. And really, then you can extrapolate from it how many visits per PT per day. Now, many years ago, I want to go backwards one more time. I was on the advisory panel on practice for APTA for many years, appointed position. I think it's one of the highest regarded appointments that APTA does. And I was on it many moons ago. And through that, I got to know Andrew Guccione extremely well, who was head of that at APTA, who I have tremendous respect for. He's also a good friend. And I would have meetings with him back in these days, and he would say, "Larry, we have too many therapists." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, just take the number of potential visits that a PT can do, multiply it, and you'll see we have too many PTs." And to a certain extent, he was right. And I'll tell you why. If you took 250,000 PTs that are licensed in the US, and let's say they average 6 or 7 visits a day, there's not enough patients in the population of the United States, about 3% of which are getting PT at any given time. It's too many PTs. What you find, most surprisingly, is that only about 20%, it's actually slightly
Right.
less, licensed PTs are seeing patients. Count me guilty. I'm one of them who isn't. And I know a lot of others that aren't. Where do they work? They work in academia. They work PRN.
Research,
Professionals. They work in research. They work in,
administration.
sales and manufacturing. And some of them have left the profession altogether. And that's a really, really small number. Now, we produce about 12,000 PTs a year. So here's another way to look at it. We have a very inefficient education system in the United States for PTs. We have about 300 programs producing 12,000 grads a year. By contrast, physicians have about 150 programs in the US producing about 20,000 graduates a year. It would take the number of orthopedic practices, by the way, you got 29,000 practicing orthopedists, 750 graduates from their, residency programs per year. That it would take 38 years to reproduce the number of orthopedists we have. And the number of orthopedists, they work well into their 60s. They're at the peak of their career. Their best, highest use is seeing patients. They're allowed to use extenders. They make a lot of money. Average salary, $400,000. Family practice physicians. Okay. We have roughly 4,400 graduates of family practice residencies per year. About 100,000 of them practicing. Would take them 22 years to reproduce their numbers. In PT, we have 250,000 producing 12,000 graduates a year. Take 20 years. The reality, though, is only take a few years if all the PTs saw patients full time, right? It just so the math on it is actually spellbinding. And then you get to some of the reasons why. Now, my post, quite honestly, and I reveal this in the second iteration, I don't really care about productivity arguments. I'm not, the fact that I'm comparing an orthopedic to a family practice to a PT is honestly quite
Right.
irreverent and irrelevant, both of them. But I am trying to show that our best and highest use as a PT is obviously not clinical. If that were the case, we'd have more than
Right.
20% of the PTs seeing patients. And we're restricted, and we're restricted horribly. We effectively have a compensation cap on the earnings that a physical therapist can do. Let me give you an example, Jimmy. Let's hypothetically say a PT works at an outpatient clinic and 100% of their patients is either Medicare or Medicare Advantage or a payer, in some states, the Blues, that follow Medicare rules. They effectively, the max revenue they can generate by seeing 8 or 9 patients a day, 46 weeks a year, 47 weeks a year, is around $210,000. Okay, that's
Right.
gross. That's before
Overhead. Right.
overhead. Yeah. And so that's before you've paid for the lights, you've paid for revenue cycle management, you've paid for any support staff that you need that contributes to you seeing those patients. And why are we at such limitations? There you got a lot of factors. Our own profession has just really restricted us in terms of the, RCs and exclusive PT can only be one-on-one, all that kind of BS. But the payers have also restricted us. They have superimposed rules that do not allow us to use extenders like PT technicians or PT assistants at the top of our license to use our extenders at the top of their license, like ortho and family practice have. And then the other one, frankly, is cultural. A lot of people come into our field for the inherent flexibility so that they can come in and out of the profession. I think then that culture, though, has got some negative connotations to it. How many great clinical PTs do you know? I got board certification in 2 areas that are then incentivized to get out of seeing patients because they can make
Correct.
more money. They get rewarded by it, in essence, through management and other kinds of things. We have a higher burnout rate than a higher attrition rate, probably than any other profession. But the biggest concern I have, all that is a concern, but the biggest concern as I have is name me one industry, one profession that you could say is less productive
Yeah.
today, given the advent of technology and innovation, than physical therapy. The data will tell you that when we used to average about 12 patients a day, we're now averaging closer to 10. And that is because of the external constraints, the rules and the regulations that are placed on us. I know
Mhm.
no other medical professional that can say that. And that is a root cause problem that we got to
Yeah, that
address.
was going to be one of my next questions, and it was that stat dropping from about 12 patients per day to 10. Despite technology and automation, why is that moving backwards? Is this self-caused? Is this a little bit of us and a little bit of everybody else? I mean, because really, ultimately, if it's caused by us, that's sort of good because we can control it. If it's caused by other people, we can blame it. We can write about it on the internet. That doesn't do a whole lot, right? But it draws attention to it. So how do we dig out of that? How do we actually
Yeah, it's a multitude of reasons. By the way, one reason, very simply, is on the math is that let's say 10 to 15% of your patients cancel per day. That
Yeah,
automatically brings your productivity ability
correct.
down. So we can use technology to help us with quick call lists and with patients because there's a high demand for PT right now. I believe that problem is a little bit fixable. I think we can get it down to 5%. Open table and other kinds of things that use it in non-physical therapy have done a good job of reducing no-show cancellations. And when you have no-show cancellations, backfilling it in with somebody who will sit at that table. So that's a fixable problem. The second fixable problem is we've got to completely renovate our own profession. We have RCs, practice restrictions and stuff within our profession that limit certain tasks that we do to exclusive one-on-one of a physical therapist. Can you imagine an orthopedics or family practice physician advertising that patients should come to them because they get exclusive
Right.
one-to-one? No, they operate at the top of their license, which I call neck up skills, which is a term I borrowed from my good friend Carl DeRosa, who first started talking about this probably 20 years ago. And the reality is we have to change those limitations. Most of the time, here's the irony. Most of the time, our practice acts allow it. So it's not our practice acts. Some states, New York, Massachusetts, there are some states that are really restrictive, just penalize our own profession. But it is our profession itself, and it is the payers that arguably restrict them. So that's a second factor that really drives it. And then of course The third piece that is also, fixable is that we have a fee for service system that effectively has made us hourly workers. Every CPT code, with the exception of a few, are
Right.
time based, and that is the way that we're reimbursed. Um, I don't think we're going to be jumping into value based care anytime soon, but I hope we do in many ways. And if we do, that could change that element of it. So parts of these are indeed fixable. Um, PT's salaries have gone up in part because of inflation and because of the education degree and student debt and all the things, and most notably the shortages. But it still has a cap to it, and that cap at some point will burst. Employers at some level can't pay above. I think the number is probably 115,000 a year in the most expensive markets, because again that cap is going to be 200 to 250,000 on
Right.
the revenue side, and we have legitimate
Yeah.
overhead. So hopefully those are the things that I've come up with. Certainly other people would speculate otherwise, but in many cases we are our worst enemy, but there are lots of externalities that have put pressure on
Yeah, the
us as
thing that
well.
jumped out at me, the quote that you had said in your two-part series was, we must stop incentivizing PTs to stop seeing patients through overemphasizing management roles that detract from patient care.
Here's a question for you. Do you want to boost your clinic revenue by $290 per patient per quarter? Of course you do. That's rhetorical. Physiotech's remote therapeutic monitoring can help you do that, enhance patient outcomes, ease provider workload, and turbocharge your earnings. Kickstart with RTM at physiotech.ca. That's physiotech.ca. And the thing you interact with the most at your clinic, if you're a therapist, like it or not, is your EMR. MW Therapy's all-in-one outpatient PT EMR gives you seamless integration of patient portals, marketing automations, and billing, all at one unbelievable value. Switching over is a breeze too. Kick the tires, take a test drive at mwtherapy.com. And where is your PT career going? It's not rhetorical, it's literal. Embark on extraordinary patient care adventures with Jackson Therapy Partners. Visit them at jacksontherapy.com. This is perfect for physical therapists eager to make their mark, to do what you want to do, where you want to do it. Discover where your career can take you at jacksontherapy.com.
Absolutely. And that's what we do. How do you get ahead? You become a clinic director who then hires enough therapists where they don't get to see patients anymore. And everybody loses sort of in that process over the long run, because you don't see a lot of PTs that get out of clinical care that go back in it.
Right.
You just don't. And so that's a tough nut to crack, because our best and highest utilization might not be seeing patients. Arguably,
Right.
it isn't, because the majority of PTs aren't, seeing
Yeah.
patients. So it's a real problem. Still think we have the best profession going. We have so many good things going for it, but those challenges are going to make it difficult. And private practice is really at the forefront of this, because they get hit with all of these
Sure.
challenges, occurring at the same time.
All right, so you can wave a magic wand. We'll sum it up, right? You can fix a few fronts. I won't ask you exactly how to fix it, but where's the where? Is it in Washington? Is it within our own profession? Where are the places that things need to change? I won't, because I feel like the how many different things need to change might be a 3-part episode. But where are these things? Like, where would you put, if you only had a certain amount of effort, where would you put the pressure to actually change the things, the biggest levers to pull to sort of reverse this?
Yes, yes, and yes. So first thing I would do is I would start within our own profession and make physical therapy the exclusive provision of a physical therapist acting within their state
What does that
practice
mean?
act. That means that within our state practice act, in almost every state, it calls for us to allow us to use extenders, allow us to leverage our neck up skills so that we could see more and more
Yeah.
patients. Okay. Then we have to battle the payers, and particularly the CPT code system itself and others that really reward us for value, not volume. Okay. I was in the military. We had no CPT codes. The average number of patients that a therapist saw in the Army, Navy in those days was about, Air Force was about 30 a day. and never felt overworked because we use 91Js and other technicians to help us leverage our ability to do evaluation skills, manual therapy skills, and the higher order skills that physical therapists. We became more case managers, but also utilizing our hands and our cognitive skills where that is what it's the best way. The third thing is cultural. I would say we have to start shifting more compensation to our therapists. I know that sounds inherently obvious, but that means you have to stop rewarding middle management. You have to say, if you want to be a manager, you're going to have to take a pay cut. If you become an office manager of an orthopedic practice, you make a whole lot less than the orthopedic surgeon or a family practice. And so you have to look organizationally and say, PTs are pretty smart. They have transportable skills. They have good skills that lend themselves well for business, marketing, other uses. And a PT can both manage a practice without needing a middle manager who's also a physical therapist that's managing a practice. You don't see MD or orthopedic surgeons being the manager of 2 or 3 multi-site practices. You see office managers and other administrative folks when you need them, and they make a lot less than that. So I think part of it is indeed cultural, and that's going to take a long time.
It's funny because,
and we have to reward our clinicians. I mean, you have to go to variable pay where they get a good base salary. And I'm not saying this applies to everybody, because some folks don't like to work under incentives. But if they view another job of moving that's non-clinical for more money, you're better off saying you can make more money as a clinician, and here's how.
The culture change, definitely important, and definitely rules and regulations, as you highlighted. I actually believe I got an email today as we record 2 hours ago, APTA New York reporting that a bill was passed by the governor that allows OTAs and PTAs to provide care to workers' compensation patients under direct and supervision of an authorized power, being a PT in New York. And that looks like more neck up skills being rewarded for being a physical therapist.
No, that's good. In Medicare, they went the opposite way. You get paid less if it's done by a PT assistant.
Yeah, and fighting those things. One of those things is under our control, which is culture change. I think a lot of people are starting to begin to recognizing it, and your piece, writing about it, stirring the pot a little bit and putting it out there and saying, let's talk about this, because if we don't talk about it, it doesn't change. What's your prediction next couple of years? Which one of these things is more likely to actually come to fruition? Is it the culture change? Because I always look at which one can I have my fingerprints on the most? And rules and regulations and advocacy, I'm all for. I'm glad someone else is doing it. That's not my bag. Glad it's going on, but I also recognize that's a long-term change. I look at culture being it's simple but not easy, but that's under our control. I feel like that's the control the controllables side.
Yeah. So a couple things. One is I hope to see PTs regain productivity to more of the 12 rather than the 10. Wow. I think through AI and other things, if they can get the matching to the right fields and all the regulatory things done correctly, I think that could help productivity and probably limit burnout a little bit. However, my fear, and there was just an article written about this about physicians, that, there's a balance there. If all of a sudden you don't have the constraints of an EMR, you're still can suffer from burnout by seeing too many patients. But I do think you'll see some incremental gains there. There's no reason why we should have productivity loss. Right. Second thing is I'm hoping the culture changes. I think the economics of PT is such, we're a penny nickel business. We're not a dime quarter business nor a dollar business. Such that the margins are so small that you're going to have to see scalability and moving to a management level that is skinny at best. And the good news is PTs don't need a lot of babysitting. They're trusted, they're autonomous. And here's the beauty: a PT that works in a more autonomous, mastery, purposeful environment thrives and needs less management. What I say to my employees all the time is those who manage best manage least. And then third thing is, I don't know whether value-based care is around. I suspect it isn't, because providers are unwilling to get to take on risk when they've got their shins kicked in us for, a lot less reimbursement over the last several years. And let's face it, value-based care, while it's attractive in many ways from a practice independent standpoint, it's not economical. And most of the primary care models, you saw what's happening with CVS. They're trying to now branch that into a separate company because of they have the insurance side, but they also have the provider, business side of it as well. And then I think lastly, we have to get the payers to change the fee for service environment to a per diem or an episodic case per day, per case, whatever. Really, instead of value-based care, you're going to see alternative payment models, which is different, right? The one is not necessarily part of the other. And those alternative payment models may allow a therapist to scale and use their neck up skills. I hope we go more to a military model, from that
Yeah,
standpoint.
I've been hearing current and former military therapists acting confused. Why is it this way when I leave the military? We had it, we do so well, and it's so effective. And look at we have data. It's not just we think, we feel, we believe. It's look at this data and the outcomes and how effective, cost effective, and quality outcome effective. And it's 2024. I've been hearing this since I was in PT school in 2014.
Well, it's very simple, though, Jimmy. I mean, the government always absolves themselves of the rules they place on everybody else.
That doesn't feel fair, Larry. That doesn't feel fair.
No,
so
I hear you.
If these are the kinds of topics that you want to dig into, I want people who are listening and watching to understand, like, you're having these conversations pretty regularly. You're having these conversations with yourself in your head. You're talking to friends with a keyboard.
Yeah.
And then that's the beauty of this, not social media, but media that's social, is these are the things that are in Larry's head all the time, or these conversations that are happening in rooms around the country, right? We're coming up on PPS. A lot of these things, plus a couple other 100 topics, get discussed. But now you're able to have those conversations at scale and share those things, and people can interact, which to me is, instead of just arguing, what we do on Twitter a lot, these are the good outcomes of platforms like Substack. So all things physical therapy on Substack. We'll share that link again. Larry, parting shot. What do you want to leave with the audience? Hopefully a good note.
No, it's a word of encouragement. There's nothing wrong with data. Just realize it and then reflect on it and say, how can I, as a clinician, continue to sustain an environment throughout my career where clinical emphasis is maintained as priority number one? If I'm an employer, what can I do to keep my clinicians practicing clinically? And what am I doing through the unintended consequences are causing my clinicians to practice less clinically? And then from an advocacy standpoint, what can we agree with? Can we agree that physical therapists under the domain of physical therapy are the arbitrators and should be able to practice through their state practice acts, which are heavily vetted at the state level through associations, rather than under the constraints of payers, or in our own particular case, our own profession, which has told us that one-on-one care is the way, the truth, and the life. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah, we did a live stream about this and where's the value in being a PT, and we came upon, or my sort of outcome of that is, it's a little culture change, right? We think like the biggest mistake you can make if you create a product or a service, or you provide a service, is assuming what about that product or service your customer actually values. I mean, so many providers will tell me, well, one-on-one care, they value it. And I'll say, like, every time? You're saying every single one. Because if you can solve my problem in half the time, I actually value that more. Now, this is case dependent, but what I mean is it's case dependent. So it's not just more one-on-one time is better. Why not 2 hours then? Why is an hour? Why is one-on-one for an hour the epitome?
Right. Why should it be one patient a day?
Right. If it's so much better than overserve, do a patient for 8 hours. And of course, that's funny, but that's going to the edge of that argument. So, like, let's figure it out. Let's figure out what the answer actually is. And let's just not assume. All things physical therapy on Substack. We'll share that link. Larry, are you headed to PPS? We're going to see you in a couple of weeks.
I absolutely will be at PPS. Sure. Come talk to me. That's how I get all my ideas, is through interactions. I talk to physical therapists, owners, practice folks all the time. And these are the kind of things that are on their mind. And now I just have the ability to kind of write about them and report what people are telling me.
The internet, it has some good uses as well. Larry Benz, appreciate you stopping by on the show.
Absolutely.